Good evening, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Black and White TV. I'm your host, Malcolm Jarell, poet, author, and entrepreneur, and I'm so excited tonight to sit back, relax, and talk about the thing that I love the best, which is poetry. I love it. It breathes through me. I live it. I eat it. I sleep it. I think about it all the time, and I'm so excited to welcome my sister Kezia, the poet. She is a poet, an author, an entrepreneur. She's one of my inspirations. She's a dear friend to me. We've been doing this thing for a long time now, and I'm just so excited that she's here with me tonight. And we're just going to just jump right into it. So, throughout our cultural sojourn here in this United States, we as Black people have carved out our own definition of what it means to be just that, Black. Woven within the tapestry of our history are deep threads of protest and a struggle for basic rights that takes on a new meaning with each generation. Howbeit, within these protests and every act of resistance, there were some who gave voice to, kept account of, and gave searing visual imagery of the Black experience as it has unfolded in our community over the time of racial oppression through slavery, all the way to now to the racial disparities that we experience through police killings and brutality in our systems, in our community. All of these poets and artists, all of them alike, have lifted our spirits. They've inspired our greater potential and have made the truth of our Black experience known around the world. So with that, I'm just going to welcome my sister, Kezia, to the table. She's going to talk to me tonight about the influence of all of this art and this rich heritage on our society and our mainstream culture as a whole.
Hey, absolutely. Sister. Hey, Malcolm. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantabulous, fantastic. I'm so excited to have you on tonight.
Likewise.
So I just want to just jump right into the topic and talk about poetry and art of the movement. We know as Black people, we can't grow up in this culture without knowing that we've been fighting all our lives, all throughout history for rights and equality in this nation.
Absolutely.
But behind all of that was mostly on the forefront. We saw all of the protest movements, the different leaders that we had over the years who have championed the cause of rights and equality. But behind the scenes, there have been poets, artists, all types of artists who have given us a different view of what this experience is. And I just wanted to talk about their influence. I can go all the way back to Phyllis Wheatley, who was born a slave and was a poet. And during that time, well, you know just as well as I that we couldn't read or write it. It was illegal. But we had someone that was giving an account of our history. Who are some notable artists or poets that you can think of just off top of your head that have made a phenomenal impact on our culture and society?
Oh man, my top one is always going to be Dr. Toni Morrison. That's always going to be probably my number one, just because she changed for me personally, she changed my viewpoint on writing. She changed my how I view writing, how I view the world, like my perspective on writing, how it doesn't have to be so cut and dry. It doesn't have to be so, this and that. Right. It's like just literally just write. And she wrote the way she wrote and intertwined thought and feeling and scenario and circumstance. It was just beautiful to me. So definitely her, definitely James Weldon Johnson. James Weldon Johnson wrote the Black National Anthem. And a bunch of other works that I don't think get as much, airtime as Lift Every Voice and Sing. But
have you heard of his Brothers American Drama?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
That's one of my favorites by him.
He wrote with such conviction and such principle. Like it was just so good. It was always very meaty, very rich. And you felt like you were part of the story, or that you were really observing something that was really special. So those are probably two of my top absolutely favorite writers.
Oh, yeah. And you were talking about Toni Morrison. You made me think about one of her quotes where she said she became a writer because she wanted to write the book that she wanted to read.
That's
essentially.
right.
It's like she didn't see anything that tickled her fancy enough to where she could just be satisfied with being an avid reader.
Mm-hmm.
So she took
She
on
wrote
the
it.
cause of
That's
becoming a
power.
writer so she could write what she wanted to read.
Yeah,
And
that's
yes,
power.
that is definitely power.
Yeah.
And it's sad that she's not with us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But that power, we should, embrace that power and feel that power
Absolutely.
and keep it alive, even for her. And
That's right.
you said James Weldon Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
I like Paul Laurence Dunbar.
Yeah.
Who wrote Masks. And
Mm-hmm.
that poem is so poignant to me because we do wear masks
Yes,
every
we
day
do.
as Black people for whatever reasons, but sometimes they can get in the way
Mm-hmm.
of who we really are. They can get in the way of us earning that acceptance or attaining that spot in mainstream culture because we've been in many ways taught to wear those masks.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's something that he was pointing out in just one of many of his poems. But that one in particular is one of my most favorites. And he wrote that in 1892, 100 years before I was born.
Right. Isn't that
So
crazy? How it still applies.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, it would be the first two poets that I read when I became a poet or when I decided that I felt like a poet. Back in 2003, I
Mm-hmm.
went into my school library and picked up Nikki Giovanni and Maya Angelou. And they were, you know, quintessential, cliche
Mm-hmm.
poets that many people say they love so much, but they were the first two, that I really studied and felt like, I could be like that. I could
Mm-hmm.
write like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're writing about how they feel, they're writing about what they see and how that changes their perspective. And I'm like, that's how I feel.
Right.
So it inspired me to, take up that mantle. Another one, uh, Audre Lorde.
Nice. Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
And how she wrote about the Black family dynamic
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes the ugly side of that, you know. Yeah, definitely
Absolutely.
Audre Lorde for me.
Absolutely.
Did you have anybody else in mind?
Oh man. Well, clearly James Baldwin. I could just, you know what? I could just sit in a room. If I
That's
could
why I
just
asked because I wanted you to say
if I could just sit in a room with James Baldwin, if I could have just heard him speak, like if I could just sat in an audience, sat somewhere so I could just hear this man speak. It was
yeah.
He's brilliant. That's the
Yeah.
best word he was brilliant. Um just all his conversations, like the ones that were recorded and stuff, all of his conversations felt like you were listening to the wise uncle,
Right.
who had all of these life experiences and seen all these things, and also had a very poetic way of expressing it. And so it's like it just draws you in, like you can't help but listen.
Oh yeah.
He is highly influential to me, just not just the words he wrote, which were amazing, but also just the life that he lived,
Right.
and how he walked out. He was, I feel like there was not, back then there wasn't necessarily such thing as an activist. You just did it.
Right.
Black folks don't have this right. Black folks can't do this. Black folks are barred from this. You just go and do it and you fight it. It's not like it's something that you have to announce to the world. Well, I am also this, I am also that. You just go out and you do it. And that's what he did. He just went out and he did it. And that's a beautiful thing to me.
Right. Could you say that, and it's awesome because I was thinking while you were talking about him, and I'm like, who, why don't we have anybody else like that? Like we have great authors, great, literary spokespersons out there in the Black community who are doing wonderful things, but it's just something about James Baldwin. It's something about Maya, something about Tony that it can't be touched. It can't be touched. And I'm like, why don't we still have that? And one thing we were talking about when we were doing our sound check, I said something about the conversation being poetic, you know, and how it almost makes you long for being around that person. Like I would love to have seen them in their element, speaking or performing, but I would have wanted to have a dinner party with them.
I know, right?
Or have them over for lunch or something, and just really talk about it and let that poetry flow. Because from there, that's where we get the real meat of the situation and how we are able to spin it into art, into poetry. It came from, I think it came from those conversations that all of those notable artists at that time, they were a collective and they were around each other. And I feel like that's what they were doing, were, just bouncing ideas off of one another and inspiring one another. And that's where that great work came from. And I feel like in today's society, we don't have that core network like we used to. And that's what we lack in means of inspiration. So that's my opinion. I feel like that's why we don't have somebody like Baldwin anymore, because of that. We almost sometimes lack that core network within ourselves.
It's almost like we had to have them during that time. It's almost like they didn't really have an option but to be a voice at that time. Where they literally created community amongst each other and formed a more collective voice, where you got all these people who look alike who are saying the same thing, like, this is not okay, calling stuff out. And I think now, I don't know, I feel like, and this is a, kind of a larger scale thing, I think Black folks are looking for a figurehead, like a leader. I think we're always kind of searching, because you think of Dr. King, and that was kind of where everybody looked to during the Civil Rights Movement. That's where everybody looked to. And so after Dr. King was assassinated, then people looking for someone else to kind of put in his place. Like, well, Black folks need a leader. Black folks need somebody they can kind of look to. And I guess maybe when that didn't happen, and then you got different movements happening too. You got the Civil Rights Movement, you got the Black Panther movement, you got a lot of different movements happening, people with different ideals about how Black people can truly find liberation, how Black people can honestly be free in a world that is, or in a country that is designed to keep them down, a country that is designed to, design the way that it is. And and so I think we were always looking and searching for a leader. And we continue to do it. Now, our parents and grandparents were alive during the Civil Rights Movement. So now us, as their kids and grandkids, kind of carry on that same thing, where we're looking for a leader too. But I think now it's less about us finding a leader and more about accountability, us finding accountability amongst ourselves and amongst our groups to be a leader. A leader doesn't necessarily mean you're in the White House, obviously, right? It doesn't mean you're in the White House. A leader means you see an issue in your community, you see a problem in your group, you see a problem with your people, and it's something that you can collect the resources or have the resources to address, to fix, to collaborate with others and get to the root of the problem, or connect with a group that's already doing that work in your community, or on a larger scale in your city, larger scale in your state, larger scale in the country, however that looks like for you, where you're willing and able. And when I say resources, I don't necessarily mean money. I mean influence. There are all types of resources. Influence, there may be people that you are in cahoots with who are willing to help, who see the cause, who see that it's something that needs to be addressed, and they can help you do that. It's less about that figurehead. I think we got stuck on that figurehead. And Dr. King, powerful as he was, influential as he was a figurehead. And so I think we've always been searching for that, and maybe not all of us, but some of us, abandoning the leader within us. Because some people don't feel like they're a leader unless there is some power. And that is an issue. We crave the power and the influence, but any leader will tell you, whether it's a leader of the Black Lives Matter movement, whether it's a leader of any movement, the Me Too movement, they will tell, heavy is the head that wears the crown.
Oh yeah.
The life expectancies of people who lead cultural revolutions and people who lead these movements is far shorter than people who don't. It is a heavy, heavy burden. And so I think we're just looking for somebody else to take the reins, and not contributing to our community outside of our comfort zones. So, more than passing out gloves with your church, which is fine. It's a beautiful thing, wonderful. But beyond that, can we really talk about community? Can we really talk about giving back? Can we really talk about investing if we only feel it as safe as the front door of the church? Like if you only feel as safe as, the handshake, which whatever your organization is. Like we've been searching, and we have leaders in us. Leader doesn't necessarily mean power. It doesn't necessarily mean influence. It means I see an issue, and I'm going to take it upon myself to look for other people who also see this issue, and see how we can't collectively come together to see what we can do about this issue. It's not titles, it's not roles, it's not any of that. And I think that's what we're looking for, like almost trying to model it after the civil rights movement. And even people who were a part of the civil rights movement will tell you it had its holes. It had its issues, And so I think we've just been trying to model that for the past 50, 60 years. And maybe that's not what it is. We keep looking for one person to solve the problem. And maybe that's not what it is.
I totally agree. And I feel like it comes with being humble enough to use what you have, just being humble enough to use what you have. But I feel like I can kind of get a feel for it, but I just want to ask you, what charged you to become a poet?
I could not understand kind of what was going on around me in my little life. I couldn't understand it. And I needed to, and I also didn't feel like if I did have questions, I didn't know if anybody was listening or paying attention to my questions. So all of that, and I've been reading since I was like 4 years old. Yeah. So I was always reading, like just everything. Man, my mom would be like cereal boxes, books in the bathroom, books everywhere, just encyclopedias, just reading. And I started to write because I just wanted to understand. I didn't feel like anything was being explained to me. So I wanted to understand. So I started writing stuff down about how I felt, how I looked at things, the change of the seasons, all that, just all the stuff that I saw. And the first thing I wrote happened to rhyme. Because in my, 7-year-old brain, that's what's supposed to happen. Things are supposed to rhyme. And so that's how it happened. And well, things have been rhyming since then. So, yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. And it same for me. It was just that basic public school knowledge of what poetry is and how it should sound, what it should seem like, until I went searching for myself,
Right.
And self-education is, of course, we know the best education because you won't find the holes, the gaps in any of that when you're seeking and you're hungry for knowledge for
That's
yourself.
right.
So I definitely love that. How do you feel as a poet in today's society? And like, what do you feel that heavy? I know I feel it, but do you feel that heavy sense of responsibility and a
Absolutely.
change in your content?
Absolutely. I wrote a couple. I wrote a few pieces, and I feel like I was at essentially different stages of grief when it comes to Black folks dying at the hands of police, unarmed Black folks dying at the hands of police, or just on Black folks dying in general. Um, and the grief is kind of always there, but most especially when it's from who is supposed to serve and protect. It hits different, and when there's so little
Yeah,
and such delayed accountability, it hits different. And I think that the pieces that I wrote just they were very emotional. They were very, I don't want to say knee jerk, but they were very emotional and very directly impacted by seeing another killing on not the video, but hearing about another Black person getting killed, another Black person getting gunned
yeah,
down, another Black person. You know, we have been grieving for so long,
for too long.
too long. And so I absolutely feel responsibility to address it, not to just sit back and be hurt and just be like, oh, I hope things get better, or just sit back and not do anything or not say anything. Um,
Yeah.
and it really takes some balance because poets were natural feelers. We feel stuff,
Oh yeah.
right? We feel it and it's heavy.
All the day long. Yeah.
And then our vision is different. Our perspectives are different. So when we feel it, we
Yeah.
feel it. And balance, like absolutely speaking out and writing pieces relative to what's happening around us, but also at the same time, not indulging and engaging in it so much that it starts to break down like our mental health or our emotional health. Like
Right.
really finding that balance. Like I'm gonna speak out about this, but gonna, I can't let it be a burden,
Right.
So yeah, absolutely feel the responsibility. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel it too. And I've been struggling with it, honestly. Just
Hmm.
trying to address it in such a way where I'm not coming across as angry, but
Hmm.
I'm telling the truth. I'm
Right.
telling the truth. And would you believe we only got 2 minutes? Would you
I
believe that?
mean, hey.
And I told you in the sound check we would probably have to do a part two. But I
Yeah, we did.
definitely wanna I just wanna get in just a quick poem.
Okay.
Just because I know things are changing and I just want you to share how you've been feeling about that.
Okay.
And just in like a minute and 30 seconds.
A poem in a minute and 30 seconds.
A quick
A
stanza or
quick little
two.
something. Oh, let's see. Okay. Do I have a minute and 30-second poem? Okay. I love, love, love the color of my skin. Now, I know I've already started, but let me begin by saying that this has nothing to do with power, panthers, presidents, or anything else that's Black. In fact, it has more to do with the slack I'm having to pick up from the lack of holding my chin up, been up and down, back and forth with the figure in the mirror, attempting to configure her worth, played first fiddle but second string to my own lack of self-esteem. Confidence was just a dream, and no wonder. In retrospect, I recollect being made subject to an elementary remnant of a paper bag test. Yes, that's right. Third grade schoolyard by the monkey bars. Two arms, hold yours up to mine. Let's see who's darker. You are, girl. But what did it prove? Nothing. Just a deeper chasm in my already shattered self-image. Self-grimaced at the thought of being any further set apart from my immature counterparts, taking their taunts as gospel, building as many walls as possible, just to deliberate on how to disable the ability of their darts to penetrate. But now, honey, I'm embracing this melanin like I just bought it with my very last $1,000,000,007, or like it's heaven sent. Check the relevance. God, most reverend, reached down from heaven and grabbed a handful of earth, and with that dirt, formed the rest of us. And if he makes no preference, best believe that's all the evidence I need. And I've been reaching toward confidence ever since. These mocha mahogany milk chocolate rivers of God's own ink flow over this fearfully and wonderfully made body. And I think it's funny that scientists think that they're on the brink of being able to bottle it. So now my motto is embrace the skin you grace.
Mm, 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 mm. And we can end it at that. That is poetry of the movement. That is what our young people need to hear. And I'm just so glad. I'm so glad. Matter of fact, you know what? We don't have to end it at that. You want to keep it going?
Okay, yeah, we can keep it going.
Let's keep it going. We can keep it going for a little bit.
Okay.
Because I got
you grace. Yeah.
I got more questions
Yeah,
after that. Because what is it about our culture where it seems like we have that struggle of embracing the skin we're in? Because I know I have struggles. I'm a poet, and I know it. I know I can get on the mic and tear it up, leave it blazing. But at the same time, I can still come home and not get sleep or feeling inferior sometimes, or feeling like, well, maybe it wasn't good, or maybe it wasn't the greatest thing. And I feel like sometimes that's ingrained in us.
Right.
So in your opinion, especially being a poet and like you said, we feel everything. And what could you say is maybe one reason why we have such a struggle with that in our culture?
So the quick answer is colorism is definitely a thing among Black folks. And it dates back, it's a respectability thing. Light skin is more aligned with white skin, dark skin is not. And the closer we can identify with white skin, the purer we are, the better we are, the cleaner we are. And we know that's not true, but that's what we believe. That's
the more privilege you may have.
Exactly. So that's what we believe, and that's what was ingrained in us. And it passed down to us from our ancestors to greats to grands. It passed down to us. And so that thing is still prevalent today. You also think about the influence of the media, who, has bigger and better platforms, lighter skin. If we talk about Black folks, lighter skin and fairer skin people versus darker skin people, it's a thing. And I don't think it's going to stop being a thing for a while. I think it's getting better among Black people, but it's still absolutely a thing. And so if something is ingrained and indoctrinated, it takes some generations to get it out.
Right. And I can say I feel the same way. And being a poet, I feel like we were talking about that responsibility. I feel like we have a responsibility to work to obliterate those notions. Like you said, that it was an indoctrination. We were trained to be that way.
Right.
But we too can move away from that. We too can come away from that. And I feel like when we sit down to write, we have a responsibility to uphold the truth in such a way where we're not just being honest about how we feel as Black people, but we're being honest to each other about what we need to do to maybe correct some of those feelings. When we feel, like I said, sometimes I may feel like I didn't meet my mark. I may feel like because of something else or sometimes even someone else that I can't achieve certain things. And it goes back to me thinking, oh, well, because I'm Black, because somebody else has all of the privilege, to themselves. But as a poet, I feel like I have to fight against that. you know, and that's the silent activism that we have as artists.
Yeah.
And we don't get that notoriety, you know, oftentimes of being on the front line using our words. I wrote a poem one time where I said, poets turn soldiers on the battlefront, throwing words from between the lines, because that's what we are. Essentially, we have to use our words as weapons against the words that were spoken on us to diminish us, to keep us degraded, to keep us demeaned, and all of those things where we have these inner problems in our culture and in our society. Like you said, things are getting better because we're able to be more, you know, able to be more reflective of what's going on, to what's happening to us. But we still have to speak the hard truth.
That's right.
You know, every day of the week, speak the hard truth, and not only, like you said, like I said, the truth about how we feel, but the truth to ourselves and to each other. You know, I feel we have that great responsibility. I wanted to talk a little more about the impact that all of, you know, how we feel right now that has on the content that we create. For me, I feel like it impacts my content in such a way where I can't get away from it. Whenever I sit down, I may want to write about love or write about, you know, something cheerful or cheerful, but at the same time, I can't get away from writing about that brother that lost his life last night in the street, no matter what the circumstance.
Right.
A black brother lost his life, or a black sister lost their life. I can't get away from trying to pay homage to that person because someone didn't care about their voice. So I have to sit down and try to go through the emotions of all of that. We're poets. We feel. We try to step into the situation to gain clarity to write that hard truth. And I feel like I can't get away from it. But then I look out into mainstream society and I see some artists who scoff at the responsibility.
Absolutely.
You know, and let's talk about that a little bit. You know, because there's one side to it. It's some of us who are, you know, holding up the banner every day. But I feel like also there's some others who sometimes make it a little hard for the message of truth to get through. What are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, I think that I'm going to say this very carefully. Okay. I think that people, humans, disconnect as a means of protection. So if you disconnect from a movement, even of people who look like you, if you disconnect from a movement, you disconnect from the responsibility and accountability that comes with claiming that movement. You disconnect from the people. It's all about you and yours. It's not a community thing. It's not a collective thing. It's about you and yours. And you are unfortunately unwilling to bend on that. Especially if one thing is like paying your bills and like taking care of you, and your voice against that thing is going to affect your bottom line and your back pocket. No, you're not going to get people to engage. You're not going to get people to do their part in spreading the word, or do their part in community work, or whatever it is. You're not going to get them to do that. Humans are inherently selfish. It is what it is. And that's a hard thing to get past, to like see the bigger picture. It's a hard thing to get past. So I think that's what people do. They disconnect I think they disconnect to protect themselves, but disconnect also to not have the responsibility of knowing or doing. Because when you know better, you know, you do better. When you know what's happening, take action and do something about it. So I think people, and some people, unfortunately, intentionally disconnect.
Right. And I mean, I can even say to add on to it, that they disconnect for traumatic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is that sometimes you may have been in the fight. You know, you may have been out there, but sometimes it gets so overwhelming that, especially when the gears of change grind slow,
Mm-hmm.
and you see the same thing over and over again, and it's like you're grieving over one name, but then here comes another the next day, and it's the sensory overload of it all can lead somebody, into disconnecting just because of that trauma,
Right.
and they just don't want to have parts of it, and I can definitely agree with that. Um, we were talking about influences
Mm-hmm.
earlier, and I could even say that I feel like a lot of the influences have a big role in how people tend to disconnect, and
Mm-hmm.
how it seems like there's a frequency of that sometimes, where even in our electoral systems, how we get fed up sometimes and say, I'm just not going to vote,
Mm-hmm.
or the person that has never voted before,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, and they can't really see the importance of it because someone told them, "Oh, your vote don't matter, your
Right.
voice doesn't matter," and they're being influenced by a a system, by a machine that aims to keep us down,
Right.
aims to keep to literally keep their knees and their boots on our necks. But we have that responsibility to fight back, and I
Right.
feel like as artists, we have a greater power of influence because we are the standard bearers of truth.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a poem one time where I said we're the keepers of a poetic flame,
That's
and we
right.
can't see that light diminished because there are others who would rather use their influence for less constructive reasons. I would say, I wouldn't say
That's a good way to put
destructive,
it.
but
Yeah.
less constructive reasons.
That's a good way to put it.
And talking about influences, what would you say are some of your poetic or artistic influences? We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but
Mm.
anybody old or anyone that's current right now, and then I want to ask, who would your poetic role model be?
Woo. I think when I started writing, I guess you could say professionally, um, I think I was very careful not to like pick and choose somebody because I just wanted it. I wanted what I wrote to be as original as possible. But at the same time, I could take influence from Toni Morrison. I could take influence from James Weldon Johnson. I could take influence from Margaret Walker and Langston Hughes. I could take influence from them and see how they structured their work. Gwendolyn Brooks, you name it. I could take structure,
Yeah.
you to take instruction from them as far as how they mapped out their works, the subjects that they talked through, and the way they address certain topics. I could look at that, but also like at the same time create my own kind of standard, my own kind of thing, and not let my voice get kind of overshadowed by other voices.
Right.
Like to have my voice and to own my voice. Um, that's been important to me from jump, and it's honestly something that I tell my coaching clients, like, yo, you gotta find your voice, not trying to sound like anybody else, but
Mhm.
your voice. Everybody else is already taken, your voice is important. And so yeah, that was the thing. So I definitely took lessons from the greats. That's why
Yeah.
if I enjoyed their poetry, their writing, I took lessons from them and just really, you know, writing was like the one thing I was kind of confident in. And so taking lessons from them just on structure and subject and traveling through that work, that
Right.
definitely came from them. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And I can say the same. I like to think that I'm still even learning, still learning from, because they keep coming out with documentaries and new work on
Yeah.
all of these greats. So it's like I'm still just absorbing all, all of that information
Mm-hmm.
to make myself a better writer. Standing on those shoulders. I mean, my God, it again going back to responsibility. Like you
Mm-hmm.
just can't run away from aiming to be great because they set that bar so high.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
right.
they really did, and I like to think like Maya. Everybody likes Maya. She's probably one of the most well-known African American poets. But
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I liked what she did, she made poetry seem classy. It
Mm.
wasn't just, she took it out of the open mic atmosphere. She took it out of the coffee house and presented it, packaged it
Right.
to a broader public. And I feel like she was definitely one who carried the cause of Black people in America because of how she did that and how
Mm-hmm.
she tactfully did that. And that's how sometimes I like to think about, like, like how would they do it? What would they say? Or, if I'm writing a stanza, would they approve of this? You know, and that's how I feel all of them are definitely more role models to me. But specifically Maya, I would say Paul Laurence Dunbar and Nikki Giovanni,
Mm-hmm.
the most part, you know, and that is
Absolutely.
it's just great. Um, you said something about, like, I'm trying to think back because it's been a lot. We were talking about a lot tonight, but you said something about disconnecting that
Mm.
I can't get it off my mind. I see a lot of young people out here who they emulate a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
they have an issue with, like you said, finding your voice, finding that voice, and
Mm-hmm.
being confident in that voice.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is with this identity crisis that is going on with our young
Now more than ever, I think that there's for some, not all, but for some, there's a serious lack, what I was talking about earlier, lack of community. Um, Communities look out for the young. Communities look
Right.
out for the youth. And I think there was such a wave of every man for himself, dog eat dog world, that unfortunately the kids got the short end of the stick and were nothing short of abandoned. And I'm not going to blame, any drug epidemic or anything like that. I'm not going to blame absent fathers. I'm not going to do that. I think it's a collection of things.
Mm.
You know, everybody's got a different set of struggles. And I think it's just a collection of things. And the ones we forgot about were the kids. Like, there are major metropolitan areas that have to fight for funding for youth programming. We have to fight to get working air conditioners in school. We have to fight to keep updated textbooks. We have to fight
Yeah.
to keep music programs and arts programs in school, things to engage the youth. We have to fight to get community programming. Nonprofits have to fight to, get the funding to provide programming and just different things. And it makes me wonder, America really touts itself on loving kids and all that stuff, but it really makes you wonder. I don't think that's true. I don't think America cares about children at all,
Mm.
because there's so many
I mean,
there's so many plugs trying to be pulled from programming that's in place, from kids who don't have anywhere else to turn, from kids who don't have other options, who can't get a scholarship here, or who can't get access there, can't get whatever. There's too many plugs being pulled on too many programs for me to believe that America cares about all kids. That's not, I disagree. And so what happens is what does it come? Right back to the community. It comes back to the
mhm.
community to have a responsibility for kids and to fight for them and advocate them. But at the same time, we got to fight and advocate for ourselves. Like, it's a never ending battle. Yes, we got to fight for the kids. We fight for our own sanity too.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So I think it's just such a big fight, and community is going to be key, but I don't think that's always in place for every kid. So you got kids who fall between the cracks. And it's, I think that's what happens.
I definitely agree. Um, I'm just looking at a message from one of my viewers. Uh, I feel like you said, I mean, everything you just said can be summed up in what you said. America doesn't care about the children,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been in a position since being a young man. I've been in a position of mentoring young people, and I see a lot of at risk. What they say is at risk.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we can talk
It's a
about as well.
buzzword.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it's like, even if that's a thing, if it's so, who put them at risk? You know,
That's good. That is good.
when we're in a society in 2020 where and I don't mean to get on my political soapbox a little bit, but
I mean,
in
hey.
2020 where we're in a society where in Japan they've just successfully done a test pilot of the first flying car, and they're saying by 2023 they want to start producing it, and a piloted car, not something that just hovers, but
Mm-hmm.
something that has to be piloted. They want to put that out into the market. But in this country, we have children who are caged, black and brown alike, whether it be for-profit prison systems that are caging our black children, or if it's immigration laws passed by a racist administration that are keeping our brown children caged at the border.
Mm-hmm.
It does something to me to where it's like I can't get to my pen fast enough
Right.
to start talking about this. I can't get to a microphone fast enough. I can't get to a Zoom call. I can't get on this show fast enough to talk about these disparities that so many of us, because there's an issue with disconnection in the black community. So many of us just don't know. It's a shame that there's a lot of black people that are ignorant of the
Mm-hmm.
true horrors of what's going on right now. But at the same time, it's because we were trained, like we talked
Woo.
about earlier, indoctrinated to disconnect. Don't worry about that. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. You know, and that's something that I swear, if not anything, I will keep writing until my knuckles fall off
Mm-hmm.
to hold up the light and tell people that these things are wrong. And we have to not only just write about it and speak the truth, but be an example to these young people that you can be the change
Right.
that you are. And we hear it so many times, cliche. You are the change that you want to
Wish to
see.
see.
But
Mm-hmm.
how many of them believe it enough to
Right.
actually start to implement that change, whether it be in their families, breaking generational curses, or if it be, like you said, in their communities, trying to get people to band together and bring back that effort of a village. It takes a village.
I am a firm believer that you cannot convince the kid who looks out of his window and sees concrete, you can't convince him that the sun shines. So we tell these kids that you can be the change, you can do that. They need to see it. And that's where we drop the ball.
Yeah.
You could tell a kid all day, if he look out the window and see concrete, you tell him the sunshine, he's not going to believe you until he sees the sunshine himself. So if he's not seeing these leaders, if he's not seeing that, once again, back to leaders, right? If he's not seeing these leaders, if he's not seeing this community, he's not seeing this collective kind of come together and make sure everybody's good, he's not going to believe, he or she is not going to believe it's possible.
That's right.
So that's why we absolutely have to be mindful and thoughtful as far as what we are doing, knowing that it's about the bigger picture. It's not just about individual comeuppance. It's not just about
Right.
we can be forwardly mobile together. We can be upwardly mobile together, but then you got it's so many sides. Black folks are not a monolith. Everybody has different thoughts and opinions on stuff. So we don't all move the same.
Write that down. Write that down. I'm gonna repeat it. Black people are not a monolith. You got to write that down. and I want to hear what comes of that, because it's and that's what I'm talking about, the poetry that comes in the conversation, in the act of being fearless enough to say how you feel and to tell the truth, which there's, like I said, so many that don't want to, but for the ones who are brave enough, our young people need to see that. They need to see it, because like you said, there's so many different things that they see that are against them, that are there to keep them hindered. We have to be the ones that are constantly putting that inspiration into them, and however we have to, whatever capacity we have, we can do that.
That's right.
I gotta read these comments from my viewers. I can't go away from it. You know Monet,
I know Monet, yes.
And she said that visual and literary art is the bridge between seeing and understanding. Said America cares about money, basic education to engage the youth, but will not present a monetary benefit for the adult that's funding them.
Absolutely.
So many teachers who are bridging the gap, whether it be by literary or visual art, and displaying our history truthfully to our young people, but they're coming out of pocket. They're hurting. Then they don't have the funding. I mean, we can go back to saying that teachers need to be federally funded, but that's a whole nother conversation. But even think about the disparities of our Black teachers, because of the communities that they live in. They got to leave from school teaching children and walk home worried about whether or not they'll be pulled over, or whether or not they'll be profiled, or whether or not they'll be struck down in the street, and still have the courage enough to get up every day and go out there and take the money that they make as a living to invest back into the children.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That's just, and now here we are with COVID and how it has absolutely impacted just the way America does things.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm hearing it from across the board. I'm hearing it from admin and principals, from teachers, from students, from parents, like the virtual learning and all that. It's like, what it has done, I think what this pandemic has done is really exposed some fatal flaws in systems that America has relied on for a very long time, and relied on those systems functioning and operating the way they always have. And kind of the holes in those systems, And I think it's just a glaring thing when we're trying to come up with funding to get all the kids who don't have laptops or don't have computers at home so they can have it, so they can have access. Or maybe they can come to the school, the ones who don't have access to computers at home, maybe they can come to the school to do the work. Or maybe we could just send them to like different community centers or something, and they could be social distance at the community center, and they can get that lesson there. Or maybe we could just have the parents come up to the school and get these things for them and then take them home, hopefully set them up. But we're providing them with laptops, but are we providing them with Wi-Fi? Okay, so maybe. And it's just like,
yep, the constant
scramble, because now you're acknowledging that there are kids at your school who go home to homeless shelters. You're acknowledging that there are kids at your school who sleep in cars. Ain't no Wi-Fi in the car. There are kids who are going to school on their parents' phones. You're acknowledging that.
Right.
But if you tell me America cares about kids, why is this just now becoming like, oh, what you mean you in a shelter? Oh, what do you mean you don't have access?
Yeah.
So and then the teachers, God bless them, Jesus. Teachers are more than just teachers at this point. Teachers have to be social workers, they have to be counselors, they have to be surrogate parents, they have to be
Absolutely.
all these things. They feed kids. I used to work with a teacher who would bring clean underwear to school. She would bring extra snacks for the kids who didn't bring lunches. She would bring a pair of shoes that maybe her daughter outgrew that were in good condition so she could give it to one of the kids, the little girls whose shoes were busting out at the seams. Like, teachers have to be so much more than teachers now. And with all the testing and planning and responsibilities they have, it barely leaves them time for instruction.
Right.
And so it's
Right.
being a teacher now is like it's being a social worker, it's being a parent, it's being all these things. And now teachers are having to take it home and try to there's a teacher on my on Facebook who she said, have you ever had a Zoom call with 21st graders? Right? And she's like, please pray for teachers.
Oh yeah.
Please pray for teachers. So it's crazy. Just all this stuff, but all of this stuff is being exposed. All of this stuff it's like, please tell me how you care about kids. Please show me how you care about, please tell me how you care about teachers. Please show me how you care about teachers.
Right.
It's sobering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do we do? Because years ago when we fought for rights, and we know that there are disparities now. When we fought for rights, there were two sides. There was one side that said let's nonviolently protest and let the world see what's going on. And there was another side that said, look, we can't wait. We don't have time to wait for a government that doesn't aim to please us anyway, to meet our demands. What can we do? Because we already know, it goes without saying that this pandemic has swept across our nation.
Yeah.
And many people, Black, brown, white, poor white, all peoples of all persuasions in this country have felt this thing. But like you said, it reveals the disparities. It pushes those who were pushing the disparities to acknowledge that these things are wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
For so many years when they were just cashing in on all of our sorrows and all of our woes, now we're in a position of saying, you can't do that anymore, because you have to meet the demands of the people. You have to own up to what the Constitution of this country says to be so for anybody that's covered as a citizen.
Right.
So in our community, because we know that disparities have been around for so many years, especially in our education system, what do we do as a community?
I think that's a big question. That is a big question. I think one of the first things we do is break down expectations. And when I say expectations, I mean
absolutely
what we expect of each other. You cannot expect all of us to have the same ideals, cannot expect all of us to have the same principles, the same things that are important to us, the same morals. We can't. And so that makes a word like common ground seem a bit muddy, seem a little bit like quicksand, right? Because common ground on whose terms?
Right.
That's why people want to kind of put a leader in place. So it's just follow the leader. But I believe in collective leadership. where everybody has a role and a responsibility without, nobody being over anybody else. Everybody has a role and a responsibility. It's evenly spreading the responsibility and accountability among the people. So I think that first, yeah, expectations for sure. Like, this is not going to be a civil rights movement. This is not going to be whatever other movement. That's not what this is going to be.
Right.
Nail down the issues that are issues to some people might not be issues to other people. People who don't have kids might not care as much about what's going on in schools. It's not that they don't care, but they might not care as much because there's no stake in it for them, right? Versus the mom with 3 kids trying to figure out how to do what to do and keep all 3 of them managed and focused on their work at home while she's focusing on her work at home, and chaos. So it's pinpoint the issues, how these things, what's negatively impacting the community, just different. Like, I'm a big proponent of lists. I love a list. Okay, because you write everything down, you get some stuff, you check stuff off as you get things done and accomplished. Yeah. And a list, please list me. All right. So, but that first one, that expectations, I think is going to blow a lot out of the water. Like, I think that's going to be the thing that's just like, yeah, we got to get that out of the way first. We're not looking for another Dr. King. We're not looking for another Malcolm X. That's not what we're looking for. Right. Not necessarily looking for a leader. We're looking for accountability and responsibility. And to go from there. Like, I know, Lord knows I don't have all the answers, but I think those expectations make a huge difference. They make a huge difference in what everybody's got their own ideas. You ask 1,000 people the same question, you're going to get 1,000 answers, 1,000 different answers.
That's right.
So I think just those expectations first, and then go from there.
I agree. Mm-hmm. I agree. And expectations, that's something that a lot of our young people have. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of expectation. They have a strong sense sometimes of entitlement because of expectation.
Because of expectations, but right.
In 30 seconds, encourage those young writers, those ones that are coming up like we came up, searching for leaders, searching for someone to guide them, to lead the way. A word of encouragement to them.
Listen, I want you to know that there's something very special that you have about you, something very special that's in you. And that thing you've been wanting to write, don't worry about it sounding like anybody else. Don't worry about patterning it after somebody that you really admire, or somebody whose work you really like. Your voice, we need to hear your voice in your tone, because that person that you like, they're already taken. They're doing their thing. No competition. Do not compare yourself to anybody, because you don't know about anybody's struggles. You don't know what anybody is up against. All you know is about what you're up against. Stay consistent. Be consistent. I can't stress that enough. Be consistent and find your voice.
And I couldn't say much more to it. I really believe that's the greatest word of encouragement for our young people, is to find their voice. Since I was a young person, that was something that I struggled with. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I made a mission for my poetry to do, is to encourage people to think a new thought, to feel a new way, find their voice, and come closer to the truth, right. The truth of the matter. Kezia, you are my sister. I love you so much.
Love you too.
And I'm just so excited that you decided to come on here with me tonight.
Absolutely.
Could you believe that we got all of that into 1 hour? And there's still so much more.
We talked about so much. We did.
Absolutely. And there's still so much more to be talked about.
For sure.
But I thank you so much, sister, for always being a constant encouragement. Constant encouragement. I'm always watching you. You come and performed at some of my events. I've performed up there at Bus Boys with you in Hyattsville, and we've been all around, just carrying that call to encourage young people to find their voice. And that could be the greatest thing. And they don't have to write poetry. They don't have to be an artist, but whatever they do to find their voice and then lend that to somebody else.
Right.
That's why I wrote the book Speak Now, because I believe in finding my voice. I felt like that was what I had to do. And I try to encourage young people to do the same. So
absolutely.
I thank you so much, sister, for coming on. You encourage me.
I'm glad.
They used to say, as I minister to you, I minister to myself. So I definitely thank you for coming on and just spending time, like I said earlier, letting your head down and rapping to me about how all of this affects you as Kezia, the poet, the author, the entrepreneur, the champion of words. I love you so much, sister.
Love you too.
And I thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, that is our time. I'm so excited for this. I'm going to bring Kezia back so we can talk some more about the thing that we love so much, poetry. To the young people out there, find your voice and use it. Don't just find it and hide behind it. Find it, use it. Find some way to get involved, because the change is happening now. It's happening around you. It's happening for you. And you have to get in on it. You have to, because so many others are suffering, and we need to bring everybody up with us. We need to build that community and keep on loving on one another. I'm Malcolm Jarell. I'm your host. This is Black and White TV. Kezia, again, thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
I wish you all well. Good night.